I pulled into the Sterling Tech Industries parking garage at 11:47 a.m., carrying the bouquet of white roses Victoria had mentioned loving last week and a reservation confirmation for Bella Luna, the Italian place where we'd had our first date 9 years ago. It was our anniversary, and I'd left my consulting firm early to surprise my wife with lunch. She'd been working late every night for the past 3 months, stressed about some major project at her company, barely making it home before midnight. I figured she deserved something special, a break from the endless meetings and deadlines she kept complaining about. The security desk sat just inside the main entrance, manned by a stocky guy in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd been working this job for decades. His name tag read Harold Martinez, and he looked up from his computer screen when I walked through the glass doors. "Good afternoon, sir," Harold said pleasantly. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Victoria Brennan," I said, setting the roses on the counter while I pulled out my driver's license. "I'm her husband, James. Thought I'd surprise her with lunch for our anniversary." The change in Harold's expression was subtle but unmistakable. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied my face. Then he glanced at my ID, back at me, and something that looked like confusion crossed his features. "I'm sorry, sir," Harold said slowly. "Did you say you're Mrs. Brennan's husband?" "That's right, James Brennan. We've been married 9 years today." Harold's jaw tightened. He looked at my ID again, then at the flowers, then back at my face like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. "Sir, I'm going to need you to wait here for just a moment," he said, his tone shifting from friendly to professional. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What kind of misunderstanding? Harold picked up his desk phone, his fingers moving deliberately as he dialed an extension. He kept his eyes on me the whole time, like I might suddenly bolt for the elevators. "This is security at the main desk," he said into the phone. "I need supervision down here immediately. We have a situation." He hung up and turned back to me. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stay right here. Don't move toward the elevators or try to access the building." "What's going on?" I demanded. "I just want to see my wife." "Mr. Brennan," Harold said, and there was something in his voice now, something that sounded like pity mixed with discomfort. "I've been working this desk for 12 years. I see Mrs. Brennan's husband every single day. He drops her off most mornings, picks her up for lunch at least twice a week, and meets her after work 3 or 4 times a month." The world tilted sideways. "What are you talking about?" Harold pointed toward the glass doors I'd just walked through. "In fact, there he is right now, coming out of the building." I turned and saw a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit walking through the lobby toward us. He was maybe 40, with perfectly styled dark hair touched with silver at the temples, the kind of confident stride that screamed executive success, and a Rolex that probably cost more than my car. He was carrying a briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other, checking messages as he walked. "That's Ryan Caldwell," Harold said quietly, "CEO of Sterling Tech. He and Mrs. Brennan have been, well, they present themselves as married. Have done for the past 3 years that I've been working this particular shift." Ryan Caldwell looked up from his phone as he approached the security desk, probably wondering why Harold had flagged him down. His eyes swept past me dismissively at first, then came back when he noticed the roses on the counter and the way Harold was positioned between us like a referee at a boxing match. "Harold, what's the problem?" Ryan asked, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Mr. Caldwell," Harold said carefully, "this gentleman says he's Mrs. Brennan's husband. He came here to surprise her for their anniversary." Ryan's expression went from confused to cold in less than a second. His eyes locked onto mine with the kind of calculating assessment I'd seen in boardrooms before, sizing up competition, measuring threat level. "I'm sorry," Ryan said, his tone suggesting he was anything but sorry. "But I think there's been some kind of mistake. Victoria Brennan is my wife. We've been married for 3 years." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at this man, this stranger who was claiming my wife as his own, and felt reality fracturing around me. "That's impossible," I heard myself say. "Victoria and I got married 9 years ago. We have a house in Riverside Heights. We have joint bank accounts. We have a life together." Ryan's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. Harold, call Victoria down here right now. Tell her it's urgent. If this story is making you wonder what happens next, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below about the craziest workplace surprise you've ever experienced, and smash that like button if you think honesty is the foundation of any relationship. Now let's continue with what happened when Victoria came downstairs. The three of us stood in that lobby for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. Harold had made the call, and now we were waiting. Ryan had moved to stand on the opposite side of the security desk from me, both of us staring at the elevator banks like gladiators waiting for the gate to open. "How long have you been seeing Victoria?" Ryan finally asked, his voice tight. "Seeing her?" I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken. "I've been married to her for 9 years. We dated for 2 years before that. I met her at a charity auction downtown. She was coordinating the event." Ryan's jaw clenched. "She told me she coordinated events before we met, said she gave it up to focus on her work here at Sterling Tech." "She never worked at Sterling Tech," I said. "She runs her own event planning business, Morrison Events. Has for the past 7 years." "Morrison Events?" Ryan repeated, and I watched him process that information. Her maiden name was Morrison? Still is, professionally. Victoria Morrison Brennan. She kept her maiden name for business purposes. The elevator chimed and the doors opened. Victoria stepped out wearing a navy blue business suit I'd never seen before, her honey blonde hair pulled back in a professional bun, her expression concerned but not panicked. Not yet. She was looking at Ryan as she approached, probably expecting some work emergency, some crisis that needed her immediate attention. Then she saw me standing there with the roses, and her entire world stopped. I watched the color drain from Victoria's face, watched her eyes go wide with recognition and horror, watched her take an involuntary step backward, like she could somehow retreat into the elevator and make this moment disappear. "James," she whispered, and the way she said my name, guilty and terrified, told me everything I needed to know. "Victoria," Ryan said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Would you like to explain what's going on here?" She looked between us, trapped, calculating. I could practically see her mind racing through possible explanations, searching for some story that might make this situation make sense. But there was no story, no explanation that could bridge the gap between the two men standing in front of her. "I can explain," Victoria said, but her voice was shaking. "Then explain," Ryan demanded. "This man says he's been married to you for 9 years. Is that true?" Victoria's eyes met mine, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Not just guilt, but resignation. Like she'd always known this moment would come, had been dreading it, but also perhaps secretly relieved that the pretending was finally over. "Yes," she said quietly. "James and I have been married for 9 years. Ryan actually stumbled backward like she'd punched him. "And us? What about our marriage?" "We've been married for 3 years," Victoria said, and hearing her confirm it made my stomach turn. "Hold on," I interrupted. "You can't be married to both of us. That's bigamy. That's illegal." Victoria's hands were trembling as she pressed them together. "I'm legally married to James. Our marriage in California is registered and official. Ryan, our ceremony in Hawaii, it wasn't legally binding. I never filed the paperwork. I told you I did, but I didn't." Ryan's face had gone from pale to red with fury. "You told me you handled all the legal documentation. You showed me papers, Victoria. Marriage certificate, everything." "I forged them," she admitted, and her voice was barely audible. "I had them made online. They look real, but they're not filed with any government agency. Legally, I'm only married to James." Harold cleared his throat. "I'm going to call the police now. This seems like something they should handle." "Wait," Ryan said, holding up his hand. He was staring at Victoria like he'd never seen her before. 3 years. 3 years of my life. I introduced you to my family. You met my mother before she died. You're listed as my wife on every company document, every insurance form, every emergency contact list. You live in my house, for God's sake." "I know," Victoria said, tears starting to stream down her face. "I know, and I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" I asked, my voice hollow. "When did this start, Victoria? When did you decide that one husband wasn't enough?" She couldn't look at me. 4 years ago, I met Ryan at a corporate event I was coordinating for Sterling Tech. We started talking, and he was charming, successful. Everything seemed so exciting. You and I were going through that rough patch, remember? After your consulting firm nearly went under, and we almost lost the house. I felt alone, scared about our future. So you found a backup plan, I said bitterly. A rich CEO who could give you the lifestyle I couldn't. It wasn't like that, Victoria protested, but her words sounded hollow even to her. At first it was just an affair. Lunches, dinners, hotel rooms. But then Ryan started talking about marriage, about building a life together, and I thought maybe I could have both. The security you gave me and the excitement he offered. Ryan laughed, but it was a harsh, painful sound. I was your excitement? Your adventure while you kept your real life on the side? You were real too, Victoria said desperately. Both of you were real. I love both of you in different ways. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true. Love? I repeated. You think this is love? Victoria, for the past 3 years, I've been wondering why you were never home. Why you stopped wanting to go on vacations with me. Why every holiday seemed to be interrupted by work emergencies. I thought you were building your business, sacrificing for our future. But you were building a whole other life. Where did you tell Ryan you were all those nights you came home to me? I demanded. What excuse did you give him? Victoria wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara. I told him I had a sick aunt in Portland who needed care. Said I spent 3 or 4 nights a week there helping her. He offered to come with me several times, but I always said she was too fragile for visitors, too private about her illness. And me? Ryan asked. What did you tell James about where you were? Work, Victoria said simply. Demanding clients, last-minute events, overnight setups. James never questioned it because I'd been working irregular hours. For years before we even met. It was normal for my industry. Harold had his phone out and was quietly giving our location to what sounded like a police dispatcher. Ryan noticed and didn't stop him. Neither did I. This was beyond anything the three of us could resolve in a corporate lobby. The house, I said, pieces clicking together in my mind. You told me you were buying property for the business, investment properties that would generate income. That's why we kept separate bank accounts for your business expenses. Victoria nodded miserably. Ryan bought the house in Mountain View. It's in his name only. I told him I was contributing to the mortgage, but I never was. All that money you gave me for business investments went into maintaining 2 separate lives. My God, Ryan whispered. The trip to Hawaii for our wedding. You told me it was your money from a big client contract. It was James's money, Victoria confirmed. He'd just closed a major consulting deal. Gave me half for business expansion. I used it for our honeymoon instead. I felt like I was going to be sick. Every time I transferred money into your business account, you were using it to support your fake marriage to him? Not fake, Ryan said sharply. Maybe not legal, but it wasn't fake to me. I thought we had a real relationship, real conversations, real intimacy, real plans for the future. We talked about having children, Victoria. Were you going to pretend those were mine while actually having them with him? Victoria's face crumpled. I couldn't have children with either of you. I couldn't risk the complication. That's why I kept saying I wanted to wait, wanted to establish my career first. The truth is, I got my tubes tied 2 years ago and told both of you I was having a minor procedure for endometriosis. That revelation seemed to break something in Ryan. He turned away from Victoria, his shoulders shaking with anger or grief, or both. You took away my choice to have a family because you were too busy maintaining your double life. I'm sorry, Victoria sobbed. I'm so sorry to both of you. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to make everyone happy. By lying to everyone? I asked. By stealing from me to support your fake marriage to him? By making both of us believe we had something real when it was all just theater? 2 police officers arrived then, and Harold quickly explained the situation. They separated the 3 of us, taking statements individually. I told them everything. From our 9-year marriage to the missing money Victoria had supposedly invested in her business. Ryan told them about the forged marriage certificate, the house in his name, the 3 years he'd spent believing he was building a legitimate life with someone. Victoria told them enough to confirm bigamy, fraud, and a dozen other potential charges. She was handcuffed and led to a police car while Ryan and I stood in that lobby watching the woman we both thought we knew being driven away. "I'm going to need copies of any financial documents showing money you gave her," one of the officers told me. "This could be fraud as well as bigamy." "I'll have everything to you by tomorrow," I said numbly. After the police left, Ryan and I stood there in uncomfortable silence. Harold had gone back to his desk, probably with enough gossip to fuel water cooler conversations for months. "I never knew about you," Ryan said finally. "I swear to God, I never knew she was married to someone else. If I'd known, I never would have pursued her." "I believe you," I said, and I did. Ryan was a victim in this too, just like me. She played both of us. 3 years, Ryan repeated, shaking his head. 3 years of my life invested in what I thought was real. 9 years for me, I said. But I guess the last 4 of those were a lie. Ryan pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "I'm looking at my calendar. All those nights she said she was in Portland caring for her aunt. Weekends, holidays. That was with you?" "Probably. Or she was somewhere else entirely. Who knows if either of us got the real Victoria." "Is there a real Victoria?" Ryan asked bitterly. "Or was she just playing roles for both of us, telling each of us what we wanted to hear?" I thought about that question for a long time. I don't know. I thought I knew her, thought I understood who she was at her core. But maybe there is no core. Maybe she's just a collection of mirrors, reflecting back whatever the person in front of her wants to see. Ryan closed his eyes. "My mother died 8 months ago. Victoria was at the funeral, held my hand while I cried, told me how much my mother had meant to her, how grateful she was to have known her. Was any of that real?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "My father had a heart attack 2 years ago. Victoria was at the hospital every day for a week, brought him his favorite books, talked to him about baseball for hours. He loved her like a daughter. If she was faking that kind of compassion, she's a sociopath." "Or maybe," Ryan suggested, "she really does love both of us. Maybe she's just someone who doesn't understand that you can't live 2 lives simultaneously without destroying them both." We exchanged phone numbers before parting ways. Neither of us knew what would come next legally, but we'd need to coordinate our stories, our evidence, our attempts to recover from this disaster. As I walked back to my car, still carrying those white roses that Victoria would never receive, I thought about all the signs I'd missed. The nights she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. The times she'd slip up and call me by the wrong name, then laugh it off as being tired. The way she'd flinch when I suggested surprise visits to her office or unexpected lunch dates. She'd been so careful, so meticulous in keeping her 2 worlds separate. But she'd also been greedy, unwilling to choose, convinced she could have everything if she just managed it correctly. The roses went in the dumpster on my way out of the parking garage. I drove home on autopilot, my mind replaying every moment of our marriage, every conversation, every intimate moment, wondering which parts had been real and which had been performance. The house in Riverside Heights looked different when I pulled into the driveway. Smaller somehow, like it had shrunk in the hours I'd been gone. Or maybe I was seeing it clearly for the first time as just a building, not a home. Not anymore. I walked through the rooms Victoria had decorated, touching furniture she'd chosen, looking at photos of us that now felt like evidence in a case file rather than memories of a shared life. There was our wedding photo, both of us young and happy, Victoria in her white dress that had cost 3 months of my salary back then. I wondered if she'd looked at Ryan the same way she was looking at me in that photograph when they'd had their fake ceremony in Hawaii. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "My lawyer says this could take years to sort out financially. She has access to my accounts, my house, everything. I don't know where to start." I texted back, "Same here. She's been handling our finances for years. God knows what she's hidden or moved." Another text. "Want to meet for coffee tomorrow? Might help to talk to the only other person who understands what this feels like." "Yeah," I typed back. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." I spent that night going through our financial records, and what I found made my blood run cold. Victoria hadn't just stolen money for her double life. She'd been systematically draining our joint accounts for years, transferring small amounts to accounts I'd never heard of, using business expenses as cover for personal purchases that had nothing to do with Morrison events. By the time I finished my initial review, I estimated she'd taken at least $200,000 from me over the past 4 years. Money I'd earned through long hours and difficult clients, thinking I was investing in our future, in her business, in our shared life. I called my lawyer at 7 in the morning, not caring that it was early. He listened to my story with the kind of professional calm that suggested he'd heard worse, though I couldn't imagine what could be worse than this. Bigamy is a felony in California, he explained. She's looking at potential jail time. The financial fraud adds additional charges. But James, I need you to understand something. Even if she's convicted, getting your money back is going to be difficult. If she spent it, it's gone. I don't care about the money, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. I care about making sure she faces consequences for what she's done. She will, my lawyer assured me. But you also need to think about yourself, about moving forward. This kind of betrayal can destroy people if they let it. I met Ryan at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed. I spent last night going through my security footage, he said, sliding his laptop across the table to show me. I have cameras on my house. I wanted to see if I could figure out her schedule, when she'd leave, where she'd go. The footage showed Victoria leaving Ryan's house at 6 a.m., driving away in a BMW I'd never seen before. According to Ryan, she'd told him she kept a car at her aunt's house in Portland for when she visited. That's the car she told me was for business, I said. Said she needed something more professional for client meetings than our Honda. I paid for it, Ryan said flatly. $45,000. Thought I was buying my wife a gift. Turns out I was funding her transportation between her two husbands. We sat there in that coffee shop for 3 hours, comparing notes, sharing stories, building a timeline of Victoria's double life. The picture that emerged was one of stunning calculation and careful planning. She'd managed her schedule like a military operation, coordinating our work trips so she could be with one of us while the other thought she was somewhere else entirely. Did she ever seem guilty to you? Ryan asked. Did she ever slip up and seem like the weight of lying was getting to her? I thought about that. Maybe 2 years ago. She had this period where she kept saying she wanted to simplify her life. Talked about selling the business, moving somewhere quiet, just focusing on us. I thought she was burned out from work. Now I think maybe she was considering choosing between us. What stopped her? I got promoted, I said. Big raise, better benefits. Suddenly we had financial security we'd never had before. She started talking about growing the business instead of selling it. Ryan's jaw tightened. Around the same time, Sterling Tech went public. My stock options vested. I became worth 10 times what I'd been worth before. So she stayed because we were both suddenly more valuable to her, I said, hating how mercenary it sounded. Or maybe, Ryan suggested, she really did love both of us and couldn't bear to give either relationship up. Does it matter? I asked. Love doesn't excuse what she did. It doesn't make the lying okay. No, Ryan agreed. It doesn't. But I think I need to understand why she did it. Not to forgive her, but to make sense of how someone could live like this for years. Victoria's arrest made the local news. The story was too good not to run with a CEO's fake wife exposed as a bigamist who'd been maintaining parallel lives for years. My phone exploded with calls from former friends, distant relatives, and curious coworkers, all wanting the details. I stopped answering after the first dozen calls. Let them read about it in the papers. Let them form whatever opinions they wanted. I was too busy trying to piece my life back together to care about their judgment. The preliminary hearing was 3 weeks later. Victoria showed up in a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back, her makeup minimal. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like the carefully constructed persona she'd maintained for years had collapsed and left just a tired woman in her 40s who'd made terrible choices. Ryan and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, not because we were enemies, but because we needed space to process our own emotions. We'd been meeting regularly for coffee, comparing notes with our lawyers, coordinating our testimony. A strange friendship had formed between us, born from shared trauma and the weird intimacy of being betrayed by the same person. Victoria's lawyer tried to argue that she'd never intended to defraud anyone, that she'd gotten caught up in complicated emotional circumstances and made poor decisions, but never had malicious intent. The prosecutor shredded that argument by presenting financial records showing systematic theft, forged documents, and years of calculated deception. When it was time for victim impact statements, Ryan went first. He talked about his mother's funeral, about Victoria comforting him while secretly maintaining another marriage. He talked about the children he'd wanted, the family he'd planned to build, all destroyed by her deception. Then it was my turn. I stood up and looked directly at Victoria. "I've spent 9 years building what I thought was a partnership," I said. "Every decision I made thinking about our future together. Every sacrifice was for us. Every dollar I earned was for building the life we'd planned. You took all of that and turned it into a lie. Not just for months or a year, but for years. You looked me in the eye every day and lied. You slept next to me at night and lied. You celebrated our anniversaries and holidays and birthdays, and every single moment was built on deception. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. That's the real crime. You didn't just steal my money, you stole my ability to believe in the fundamental honesty of human relationships." Victoria was crying, her shoulders shaking, but I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even anger anymore. Just emptiness where love used to be. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison for bigamy and fraud, plus restitution to both Ryan and me for the money she'd stolen. Not that either of us expected to see much of that money again. Victoria's event planning business had been built on lies too, propped up by money she'd stolen from both of us rather than genuine success. After the sentencing, Ryan and I walked out of the courthouse together. 3 years doesn't seem like enough, Ryan said. Nothing would seem like enough, I replied. She took years from both of us. There's no sentence that gives those back. So what now? Ryan asked. How do you move forward from something like this? I thought about that question. I guess you just do. You wake up every day and make the choice to keep going. You rebuild piece by piece. You learn to trust again, slowly. You remember that what Victoria did says more about her than it does about us. Think you'll ever get married again? Ryan asked. Ask me in 5 years, I said. Right now, I can't imagine trusting anyone that much ever again. Yeah, Ryan said quietly. I know what you mean. 6 months later, I sold the house in Riverside Heights. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I moved into a downtown condo, something modern and clean with no history attached to it. Started fresh. Ryan and I still met for coffee occasionally, though less frequently as time passed and we both worked on rebuilding our separate lives. He started dating again, someone from his company who'd known him for years before Victoria and understood the baggage he was carrying. I wasn't ready for that yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was learning to be okay with that, learning to find value in my own company, in friendships that didn't require the vulnerability of romantic love. Morrison Events closed down within months of Victoria's conviction. Turned out most of her clients had been fictional, created to justify the hours she spent away from both homes. The few real clients she'd had dropped her immediately once the news broke. Who wanted an event planner famous for living a double life? I ran into Victoria's mother at a grocery store about a year after the trial. She looked old, worn down by shame and grief. She tried to apologize, but I stopped her. Your daughter's choices aren't your responsibility, I told her. You didn't do this. She did. I should have known, she said. There were signs, weren't there? Times when her schedule didn't make sense, when she contradicted herself. I just never questioned it. None of us questioned it, I said. That was her gift. She made people believe what she wanted them to believe. The roses I'd bought for our anniversary had died in my trunk, forgotten in the chaos of that day. I threw them away weeks later, dried and crumbling, a fitting metaphor for the marriage they'd been meant to celebrate. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never gone to Sterling Tech that day. If I'd just called Victoria and suggested meeting for lunch instead of surprising her. Would she still be maintaining her double life? Would Ryan and I still be oblivious, sharing a wife without knowing it? Probably. Victoria had been doing this for years before she got caught. She might have kept going for years more, juggling her 2 families, her 2 homes, her 2 versions of herself. Maybe eventually one of us would have died, and she'd have played the grieving widow while secretly relieved to finally live just one life. Or maybe she would have just kept going, kept lying, kept stealing from both of us until something else exposed her. A medical emergency where both husbands showed up at the hospital. A legal complication that required documents she couldn't forge. Some other random chance that brought her carefully separated worlds crashing together. The human capacity for deception never stops. Amazing me. Not just Victoria's ability to lie, but her ability to make those lies seem like truth. Her ability to look at me with complete sincerity and tell me she loved me while living an entirely separate life with another man. That's what haunts me most. Not that she lied, but that she was so good at it. That I believed her completely, trusted her absolutely, never suspected that the woman sleeping next to me was maintaining an entirely fictional version of herself. Ryan once asked me if I thought Victoria had loved either of us. I didn't have an answer then, and I still don't now. Maybe she did, in whatever broken way she was capable of loving. Maybe she genuinely believed she could make both of us happy by dividing herself between us. Or maybe love was just another role she played, another mask she wore, no more real than the life she'd constructed around it. I'll probably never know, and I've made peace with that. Some questions don't have answers, and some betrayals are too complicated to reduce to simple explanations. What I do know is this: I survived. Ryan survived. We both came through this disaster damaged but not destroyed. We learned hard lessons about trust and deception and the fundamental unpredictability of other people. And we learned that sometimes the person you think you know best is actually a complete stranger. Sometimes the life you think you're living is just a performance in someone else's elaborate theater. The security guard, Harold Martinez, retired 6 months after Victoria's arrest. He sent me a card saying he was sorry for being the one to expose everything, but hoped I understood he'd had no choice. I wrote back thanking him. Better to know the truth, no matter how painful, than to keep living in an elaborate lie. That's what I tell myself anyway. That knowledge is better than ignorance, that painful truth is preferable to comfortable fiction. Most days I believe it. Some days I wonder if I wouldn't have been happier never knowing, never walking into that lobby, never seeing my wife's face when she realized her two worlds had finally collided. But those are the thoughts you have in the middle of the night when sleep won't come, and the past plays on repeat in your mind. In the daylight, in the real world, I know Harold did me a favor. He saved me from years more of deception, years more of unknowingly sharing my wife with another man. The white roses were for an anniversary that never really existed, a celebration of a marriage that was only half real, a love that was divided and diminished by lies. I'm glad they died. They deserve to. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about trust and truth and the people we choose to believe, please hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts on how someone could maintain a double life for years. And give this video a like if you believe that honesty, no matter how painful, is always better than comfortable deception. Because at the end of the day, we all want to believe the people we love are who they say they are. We want to trust that the life we're living is real, that the promises made to us are genuine, that the person sleeping next to us is exactly who they appear to be. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're playing a role, maintaining a facade, living multiple lives simultaneously. And when that truth finally comes to light, all we can do is pick up the pieces and start rebuilding something real from the wreckage of their lies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.